Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. Time seemed to freeze to a standstill. Hinata's eyes were dead, their familiar lavender hue looking up at them rapidly as they began to mist over. Naruto had thrust his fist directly into Hinata's chest with a horrific squelching noise, and she did not survive the attack. Had she still been alive, she would have paused to look up in the face of the former boy she had loved, and seen that the tender display of remorse had been replaced by the visage of a pure psychopath. But she wasn't even able to do that. Perhaps it was even merciful that she had died upon impact, the hole having been punched straight through her heart. Her dead eyes were frozen in a state of perpetual shock and pain, which she had realized in the final split second of her life. The dead Hinata made nary a peep when Naruto pulled his arm from Hinata's dead body, and the horrible squelching noise rang again. A vicious smile was on his face as blood began dripping down his arm in small droplets. He regarded the rest of his former friends before him. Practically everyone was in a state of shock. What a stupid bitch. Did she really think that trying to appeal to my humanity would just magically get me to renounce my ways? Though, I'm still shocked that all of you just stood there and allowed it to happen. Don't tell me you all thought I could be redeemed as well. Free, Kinori. Naruto had closed his eyes for just a few seconds, but as he did, he heard a voice packed with pure rage utter those words, and Naruto knew it immediately to be the command of a Shirkai. Stop it, Niji. That was Shikamaru's voice. Naruto casually drew his sword with no bit of hesitation whatsoever. Without even thinking, he put it up to his face to block a unique 5-pronged Zanpakuto that was apparently intent on taking his head off. It was a strange weapon, it somewhat resembled a trident, but with 2 extra prongs. The 2 extra prongs on the ends were curved in such a way that they stuck out from the middle prongs. Essentially, if Naruto blocked the strike, he'd have the 2 curved prongs pointed directly at his neck. Really, you're the one that gets the most upset over that? And you used to hate her so much back in Konoha. In a way, I guess you can say I'm finishing the job you tried to do 300 years ago. Silence. Niji screamed. Naruto had looked up boredly to see the other Hyuga clan member in the group attack him out of pure rage, when he saw Hinata slump to the floor the way she did. Free of any inhibitions, he had been the first one to attack Naruto, essentially getting over the fact that Naruto was once a beloved comrade within the village of Konoha. No one else had jumped into the fray to help him. Fly, Ajikajitsum. A burst of white Ryatsu emerged from the ends of the 2 curved prongs at the end of Niji's Zanpakuto. Like 2 missiles, they loudly rocketed off the rest of the Zanpakuto, and with the way they were positioned, they were to stab right into Naruto's neck from opposite sides. Quick as a flash, Naruto brought his sword up and blocked both of them at the same time out of pure instinct, but that left him wide open for an open thrust from Niji. She loved you. Niji took the opening while Naruto was still recovering, taking time to say those words while he thrust. It's been 300 years. If that's what love is all about, then she's retarded for clinging on to those feelings for so long. Naruto sneered at the other Hyuga, thrusting himself out and letting his Iero block the strike. The Zanpakuto clanged against his chest, not even coming close to penetrating the thick Iero. The shock of the impact traveled back up through the golden spear and through Niji's body, and it was strong enough to cause him to falter. You should have just stayed quiet, not that it would have helped you in the end. You're all going to die here, you see. Naruto advised, using his Sonido to get behind Niji. He thrust out an elbow which caught the reeling Niji in the back. The blow was strong enough to knock him away several dozen feet, where he was incapacitated for a while. What, did you think this was a performance or something? None of you even moved a muscle during that entire thing. For all the talk that you guys stick up for your comrades, were you just content with the fact that Niji might have possibly been killed? Naruto was done with Niji for now, so that only left the rest of the Konoha Association there to hold Naruto's attention for the time being. Naruto. Minato muttered. After seeing him in action, and seeing the things he was willing to do to them with his own eyes, he realized that they were all his targets. He was a fool to think that Hinata could redeem him with a few pretty words. Yet still, he exuded an uncomfortable amount of control of the situation, where he seemingly willed the entire group to just stand there, confused and unsure about what to do. A rumble of Ryatsu came from down below, which cleanly wiped the smirk off of Naruto's face. Waves of hollows were still pouring into the dimension, yet the royal guard was apparently taking care of them. They would only be distracted for so long with hollows at this level, but Naruto was hoping at least a couple of them would go down. His wish was pretty much granted when one of the extremely large Ryatsu signatures went out, no doubt a royal guard who had been overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Nevertheless, he couldn't stay here and fight all them, when the other members of the royal guard could come up at any time. He had confidence in his ability to kill one, but 6 of them at a time was far beyond his capability, and the only other Espada he could see holding his own against one of them was Ulquiorra. "I'd love to rip every one of you limb from limb, but unfortunately, I have to get into the palace as soon as possible. Catch me if you can, Konoha nerds, and maybe then we'll see if you can slow me down." That seemed to be enough to jolt the group of Konoha Shinigami out of their stupor, but by that point it was too late. Naruto's Sonido was much too quick, and with the head start he had gotten, he would have been at the palace before any of them could catch up. He stepped down near the rest of the Espada, who hadn't moved during the entire ordeal. "Naruto, what did you do?" Sakura asked. "Oh, nothing, really. I just left them a bit of a present before we got started with the main event. Unfortunately, I don't have time to stay here and fight all of them." "Ulquiorra, you're coming with me. Sakura, I suppose you can come along too. We're heading into the palace. The rest of you." He mulled over the 4 remaining Espada. 6 of them remained now. 2 of them had been killed in Soul Society, one by him, and one by his father it looked like. Would Stark, Haribel, Neutra, and Grimjow be enough to stop them? Maybe, but his father was a real wild card. Hopefully, Stark was strong enough to capture him. "Is it enough?" he asked. "Stop them. Kill them if you have to, I don't care anymore. But, make sure that you capture Namikaze Minato alive. When I'm done up in the palace, bring him to me alive. Understand?" he ordered, taking good long looks at Grimjow and Neutra, who were shaking with glee. Those 2 probably couldn't beat him anyway. The 4 Espada in front of him nodded without making a sound. Over on the other side of the road, the Konoha Shinigami had started moving, apparently in hot pursuit of the errand car. The 4 Espada took off, towards the apparent place that would become a battlefield for them. That left Naruto, Ulquiorra, and Sakura there at the foot of the palace, while the rest of the royal guard members fought through hollow after hollow down below in the vestibule road. "Sakura, what do you know about the Soul King? If we activate the device he is deep within the Greater Soul King Palace, then it's likely that he would get in the way." "Well, you've told me all about what El Libro de Ciclos entails, and what exactly is at the center of the Greater Soul King Palace. Obviously, you know the duties that he is required to perform, and the symbolism that his existence provides throughout Soul Society. As for his combat abilities, they are low. It is the reason that the Royal Guard exists. If you or any of the Espada were to engage him in combat, he would be extremely easy to defeat, if not somewhat harder to kill." "Hold on," Sakura said after she was done explaining the purpose of the Soul King. They had come up to a strange hole in the wall of the Greater Soul King Palace, where a bluish barrier covered the entrance into what apparently was the Greater Palace. "The Great Door to the Palace. It's covered in a barrier. Just let me take care of it." She placed a hand on the barrier, dispelling the Kiddu. When the blue energy dissipated, the hole allowed the 3 individuals access to the suspended palace, and whatever may lay inside. "Who do you guys want?" Stark asked. Lillinet had not let go of his pant leg since Soul Society. She had been startlingly silent during the entire ordeal, and the other Espada even forgot she was there for a while. There was something about this invasion that was bothering her, and she wasn't putting her feelings into words. Harabel of course did not say anything, but Grimjow and Neutra were not paying any attention to him. The two of them were already jockeying for position, both bloodthirsty Arrancar trying to be the first one to kill someone. Go sit the fuck down over there, weak-ass panther. I can handle all these fuckers by myself. Neutra hissed at Grimjow, who didn't take too kindly to Neutra's jabs. I'd love to go over and watch these Shinigami break through your weak-ass arrow that you love so much, but I wanna get in on the fighting. Don't even fucking draw your weapon, Imma, kill these bitches will one attack. All of them. Which is more than you could ever do. 10 versus 4. Harabel finally said, though it was more to Stark than to the two Arrancar fighting in front her. The 10 Shinigami were pretty close to their position by this point, and the Espada needed a game plan. And we don't really know the capabilities of our opponents. The 4 Espada halted, even Grimjow and Neutra, though the psychotic smirks were still heavily present on both of their faces. The 10 Shinigami in front of them had apparently been rushing after Naruto at the present point in time, but they were fairly surprised when they encountered the 4 Espada along the way. Grimjow and Neutra took up the front, while Stark and Harabel were behind them a few feet, approaching the situation with a much more passive approach. They were calmly evaluating the situation. Stark, I believe I have grasped the situation. Harabel whispered, so quietly that not even Grimjow and Neutra could hear what she was saying. What are you planning? Stark asked back. Judging by the Ryatsu of these 10 Shinigami, it's clear who the biggest threats are. The rest of the targets have a Ryatsu level that should be fairly manageable by an Espada of any rank. I feel that as the 2 highest ranking Espada present, we should isolate these larger threats from the rest of their group. You, Arrancar, get out of our path immediately. We have no business with you. One of the Shinigami spoke. It was Niji, who was still seething readily over what had happened earlier. Blood from running down his temple in a small stream, a remnant from his fight with Naruto. Minato, honey, we don't have time to fight these Arrancar. Did Naruto put them in our path to stall us? Kushina asked her husband, who looked very frustrated over the distraction. Don't expect them to just move out of our way, Niji. These Arrancar are elite. I can tell just by looking at them that they are prized very highly by Naruto, Shikamaru pointed out. So, what do we do then? Who knows what could happen in there while we're out here fighting these Arrancar? Tsunade said. Are we just gonna sit here and chat? Let's get the stupid fight started already. Grimjow roared. He pulled his Zanpakuto from its sheath before he stuck it in the ground. Is he gonna? Stark said suddenly. Using that move here could be problematic. Whatever it is you're gonna do, I won't let you do it. Minato roared. He went ahead of everybody else, using his advanced Shuanpa to get behind Grimjow and try to stop the attack. His sealed sword was met with another one, as Stark took rare action and blocked Minato's attack before it could hit Grimjow. Grimjow was too caught up in his insanity to even register what had happened. Minato! Kushina cried in worry, as she flashed directly next to her husband. We had registered you two as the premier threats here, but it seems that you've come to us. We don't have to administer any extra effort. You are already here. Kushina turned away from her husband as she registered the female voice, seeing Harabel walk up next to her. Why are you preventing me from getting to my son? Kushina asked, anger flooding her voice. She had done well to mask her old temper throughout her life as a Shinigami, but with so much on the line, it was beginning to resurface. Grimjow, meanwhile, was still absorbed in whatever it was that had him focused. But Stark's fears were confirmed true when he took his thumb and slid it against the blade of his Zanpakuto. Hey! Why the hell would you want to use that technique right here? Neutra snarled at Grimjow. Even he wasn't that reckless. Besides Stark, Harabel, Minato, and Kushina, every individual on the bridge was in range. Gran Rey Zero. With a smile on his face, Grimjow shot the strong blue Zero out of his hands like a rocket. Neutra leapt out of the way from the wide beam, but the other 8 Konoha Shinigami were not expecting an attack of this caliber. "Incoming!" Kiba shouted. The Shinigami dodged the best they could, but they couldn't do anything to stop the beam from impacting the stone ground form where they stood. It ripped right through the stone, melting it instantly while putting a large hole in the bridge. Grimmjow was laughing maniacally. That is, until the force from his Gran Ray Zero caused cracks to splinter out all across the wide bridge they were standing. They spread out, all the way back to where Grimmjow was standing, though it wasn't just him that was in danger of falling. Neutra, and the entire Konoha Association with the exception of Minato and Kushina were in danger of falling down into the pit of hollows below. "Fuck you, Grimmjow." That's what happens when you use Gran Ray Zero in this situation. Neutra screamed at him as the ground crumbled away in front of them, sending the Sexta Espada tumbling down below into the vestibule road. "What the fuck?" Grimmjow had the decency to ask when the ground gave way in front of him as well, sending him tumbling down with rubble along with Neutra. The other 8 Shinigami tried to get to stable ground immediately, but their flash steps weren't advanced enough to get to safe ground, so they were sent down too. Of all 8 of them, Ichigo was the only Shinigami among the group whose flash steps were advanced enough to get to a stable portion of stone, and when he emerged, he was behind even Stark and Haribel. "What are they doing?" Stark asked himself, putting a frustrated palm to his face. Nevertheless, Grimmjow's reckless attack had inadvertently removed 7 targeted Shinigami from their presence, but the 3 with the strongest Ryatsu signatures remained. "It doesn't matter. Our necessary target is right here," Haribel stated. "Do not let him get the best of you." She ordered the higher-ranked Espada. Stark didn't even seem to care. "Yeah, I got it. I'll make sure to try this time." "You two, who are you?" Minato asked. His mood was getting sourer and sourer the longer he was kept from confronting his son, and his wife looked like she was about to explode from rage. "Tercera Espada, Coyote Stark." Stark introduced himself, with a supreme lack of passion. "Quinta Espada, Tia Haribel." Haribel did the same. "Third and fifth, ha. Both of you seem to lack many of the traits that we Shinigami define hollows as. In fact, judging from the way your appearance is and the way you carry yourself, I would say you two are the closest one can possibly get to being human while still being technically an Arrancar," Minato pointed out. "What's your point?" Haribel asked coldly. "Why are doing this? Why are you helping my son?" he asked. "That is none of your concern. Shinigami like you would never understand what I owe him. I decided to follow him, no matter the consequences, no matter how evil he became. I promised I would follow him." Her fingers found her way to her uniquely shaped Zanpakuto, and she slid her index finger through the hole in the key-shaped hilt of the sword, drawing it from its sheath. "If you want to reach him, you'll have to get through us first. Either way, you will see your son." "You dumbass, piece of shit, fish-breathed cat. Look at what the fuck you did." Neutra was livid as he moved a piece of stone off of his body. His arrow had made sure that the fall had not hurt him, but with the battle around them so fierce, the 2 Arrancar had gotten caught up in battles with allied hollows. However, the combined Ryatsu of the 2 Arrancar seemed to exude the presence of a fierce predator, and as such the reaction of the other hollows was to steer clear of the Espada. Right now, the hollows avoided the spot they were in out of instinct, not wanting to test the nerve of one they considered an apex predator. It was the instincts of a dog-eat-dog world, and the hollows were being tested. As such, the area where they fell was a circle that appeared like it had a natural barrier around it. The 2 Arrancar could fight there without any hollows getting in the way. It also meant that the 7 Konoha Shinigami could lay there in the middle of the road without automatically being swarmed by hollows. "Ow! Oh man, that hurts. What the hell was that?" Kiba shouted, climbing to his feet rapidly. A few scuffs and bruises were along his body, but he seemed primed and raring to go for the next fight. "It looks like Minato and Kushina were left up there with those other 2 Espada, and the rest of us were thrown down here with that attack. What do we do, Jiraiya? Tsunade asked. Well. This still doesn't work out perfectly for us. Grimmjow started. 3.5 for each of us. Don't argue about anything this time, Neutra. This is about as fair as it's gonna get. We'll take 3 of them at a time, and whoever fights the best gets to kill the last one. Yeah, whatever. I still wanna just take all 7 of these pussies and be done with it, but God knows you'll never stop bitching if I don't leave you any prey to fight. So, who are you gonna take? Grimmjow surveyed the 8 Shinigami in front of him. Him, and him, he proclaimed, pointing to Jiraiya, Shikamaru, and Niji, respectively. That left Tsunade, Ino, Rin, and Kiba for Neutra, which he did not look pleased. TCH. You leave me with all the damned women. It still feels like you're fucking insulting me. Quit your bitching, already. Do you wanna fight or what? I'll kill you, you little bitch. The 2 Espada continued to bicker, which allowed the Konoha group a chance to get a breather before taking on the 2 Espada. To answer your question, Tsunade, it seems we've been cut off from Minato and Kushina, and the Greater Soul King Palace up above us. As much as I'd like to admire your huge knockers right now, these 2 Espada are among the main culprits of those who invaded Siriidii. They need to be taken care of. What was that, you perverted old shit? Tsunade roared at him. The perverted little jab he had made wasn't helping. But, he was right. These 2 Arrancar were huge threats to Soul Society, and part of the reason they had come here was to stop Naruto's army. Well, fuck, here they come anyway. We don't have much of a choice here, do we? Kiba shouted, as the lanky Neutra descended upon Tsunade. Kiba shot out a foot that connected with the sexta before he could attack the former Hokage, but the manic grin never left his face even as he was kicked away. He landed with a thud on the ground 10 feet away, but he got to his feet almost immediately, and he was snickering deviously. Is that it? That's all the force you could muster behind your attack? Kiba cried out as his leg screamed in pain from the impact. It was like kicking a steel wall. What's with this guy's skin? It nearly broke my leg. Kiba hissed, trying to walk off the injury. He didn't really have time to recover, as Neutra was in the air, his bizarre side-like Zanpakuto swinging over his head. The tried and true formula of an ally attacking Neutra didn't seem to work, until the Konoha group tried to have Tsunade intercept the Sexta Espada instead. Her fist cracked against his ribs, and for once, his arrow was broken. Tsunade had not lost any of her strength over time. Neutra flew back further this time, because the force from the punch was so much stronger. He flew back into the horde of hollows, his body weight and arrow splattering a few weak ones into paste. Neutra hissed, his stringy hair falling all over his face. His side-like Zanpakuto had flown from his hands, but when he got up, he looked at the Konoha Shinigami with no small amount of hatred. He pulled his Zanpakuto up from the stone ground, swinging it wildly in the direction of Tsunade, Ino, Rin, and Kiba. Neutra was still fairly slow for an Espada-level Arrancar. The 4 Shinigami nodded at each other, while Tsunade and Rin rushed Neutra using their Shuinpa, while Kiba and Ino remained locked as Neutra's targets. 2 Zanpakutos emerged from their sheaths, and all of a sudden, Neutra had 2 blades pointed at his throat from opposite angles. Neutra halted his advance, a frown settling on his face. Ah, what was that? You got your ass captured. Grimmjow roared at him from the other side of the circle. He was busy fighting Niji, Jiraiya, and Shikamaru. Shut up. I got this, he snarled back at Grimmjow, even as the 2 women were glaring at him with anger, their blades pointed at his throat. Don't move. This battle is over. Rin commanded. You should have just gone through and stabbed me. Not that it would do any good, but do you think this is just some kiddie crap on the playground? Ha! Neutra screamed. He then walked directly into the tips of the blades. Sparks flew as his arrow underneath the pressure, and Neutra then nonchalantly lifted his Zanpakuto. Rin and Tsunade, both sensing he was about to clatter the swords from their hands, pulled away before he could initiate them in close-quarters combat. "Tsunade-sama, what's with this guy's skin?" Rin asked. The two women were flanking him at opposite sides, trying to make him divert his attention to one of them. "Iero, an Arrancar's Ryatsu enhanced skin makes it stronger than iron. And from the looks of things, this one has a particularly strong Iero." "What do we do then, Tsunade-sama?" Ino asked, from over to the side. Neutra was still cracking his neck. "Sprout, Shinsei no Heisu," Tsunade shouted. Instead of answering Ino's question, she otherwise gave her the answer right there, activating her Shurikai immediately. Neutra raised a non-existent eyebrow when he saw what Tsunade was clutching. The blade of the Zanpakuto had disintegrated completely, being replaced by what appeared to be the large bud of a yellow flower, its closed petals on the end of the hilt. "What do you plan to do with that thing? You can't expect to fight me with a stupid plant, you bitch!" Neutra roared. Tsunade didn't say anything, instead opting to simply sit down like she was in a meditative stance. She raised her sword to the sky, and closed her eyes. On the end of her Zanpakuto glowed with a yellow-green Ryatsu, before it opened like a Venus flytrap. 3 vines whipped out from the interior of the Venus flytrap, but they did not veer towards Neutra. Confused, the Arrancar watched the vines seemingly continue to extend from a space that shouldn't be able to hold that length of matter. Yet the vines continued on as if they were limitless, and 3 of them embedded themselves within the backs of Rin, Kiba, and Ino. "What the hell? Tsunade-sama. Don't worry about it, you too. This is Tsunade-sama's technique. Trust in her. But now, we're going to have to take the field for this one, she can't fight anymore like this," Rin told the 2 younger Shinigami. "Just don't get any limbs cut off. This Shurikai can't heal that." Tsunade called out to the 3 of them, maintaining her meditative stance as she controlled the vines. "Well, all I know is that the blonde bitch is doing something pretty important right now, so I guess I'll just..." Neutra trailed off, sailing towards Tsunade with his Zanpakuto poised to take off her head. Clatter, Ryuba no Odo. Neutra swung his Zanpakuto down even as Tsunade did not move at all or even flinch, though the metal of his Zanpakuto collided with another metal instrument that resembled a tuning fork. "Hjitfish." Neutra growled, as when he struck the tuning form, he felt slightly disoriented. Coupled that with 2 more Shinigami heading at them with vines sticking out of their backs, and things were beginning to frustrate him. As he regained his senses, he bypassed Kiba and Ino while avoiding another strike from Rin. He took advantage of the lowered guard and swung his Zanpakuto, catching Rin in the chest with a nasty slash. The woman looked surprised for a moment, though the vines in her back from Tsunade's technique allowed her to knit up the wound as if she were being reborn. "Not gonna work. Not underneath Tsunade-sama's powerful healing." He brought up his Zanpakuto and blocked 3 more strikes from the Shinigami, before he got frustrated and threw them off of him. Yet when he did that, the strange sensation overcame him once again. "Arg! You fucking Shinigami! Your annoying tricks are getting on my nerves. You want me to slash all of you to pieces? Huh," he snarled, raising his Zanpakuto over his head. "Pray, Santa Teresa." Over on the other side of the radius, Grimmjow was not paying any attention to Neutra's struggles. He never liked the asshole anyway, so what did it matter to him if he died? Grimmjow was grinning like a lunatic as he punched Niji over and over again. His Zanpakuto was not doing him any good here, as Grimmjow was far too physically competent to be overwhelmed by it. He closed his eyes and grinned wider, drawing his Zanpakuto in a flash and avoiding a strike from Jiraiya, who had snuck up from behind him to try and get a cheap shot. Too easy. Grimmjow jumped back, actually expecting a 3rd strike to come from somewhere else. Yet it seemed that Shikamaru wasn't actually doing anything. He had seen that Shinigami before, back when he was still under Aizen's command. He had taken him out fairly easily. Did he get stronger, maybe? Then again, he seemed hesitant to jump into the fray, like he knew that he couldn't take Grimmjow on head-to-head. Perhaps he hadn't gotten much stronger after all. But Grimjow was an Arrancar who held on to grudges for a very long time, and for that reason, he locked onto Grimjow. I could use some more help, you guys. We've gotten into a bad situation, but right now he's only targeting me. I need some more time to think up a suitable strategy to fight this guy. I've got it. Croak, Gamma no Yuta. Jiraiya roared. Jiraiya's katana began to change shape as what appeared to be a replica of a toad appeared on the Zanpakuto's guard, making it look like the blade was protruding out of the toad's mouth. As he released his shuriken, his katana became glazed in what seemed to be a sickly greenish fluid, much like phlegm. What the hell is that? Grimjow asked. Let me ask you something, Arrancar. Have you ever had the pleasure of being digested by a toad's stomach? Jiraiya asked. A bit of the fluid fell off of the blade, and when the droplet hit the stone floor, it began to instantly corrode. What was coating Jiraiya's sword was highly concentrated stomach acid. Jiraiya-sama, you're the only one who can possibly stand up to him. Niji shouted. He was heavily bruised, despite using his shuriken on him. His failed to stop the Arrancar. You weak-ass Shinigami think you can stop me? Even with your shitty sword? Grimjow said, mocking Jiraiya's shuriken. Allow me to show you just what I can do. He drew his Zanpakuto and held it aloft, pointing the tip of the blade back at himself. The three Shinigami winced when they realized what he was about to do. Grimjow raked his fingers over the back end of the blade, allowing it to glow a light blue. Grind, Pantera. Ichigo had left Minato and Kushina behind. It wasn't like he had wanted to leave them there, but they had reassured him that they would handle the two Espada that were left on the bridge with them. He had already gotten a head start, so he was meant to catch up with Naruto and Ulquiorra. He had the power. He could see them now, at the entrance to the Greater Soul King Palace. Naruto, the human-turned-Shinigami roared, as the three individuals in front of the palace halted. Naruto turned around first, and his eyes snapped open when he saw Ichigo running directly at him. Ulquiorra! He hissed, to which the Segunda nodded and drew his Zanpakuto. There was a flash of movement, and Ulquiorra stopped Ichigo, who had swung his giant butcher knife Zanpakuto at Naruto, which was then promptly blocked by Ulquiorra's own sword. Ulquiorra! Ichigo yelled, as Naruto and Sakura disappeared into the palace. Ulquiorra barely acknowledged Ichigo's presence, as if he were little more than a bug to be crushed. Kurosaki Ichigo, you're alive, he commented. No thanks to you and Naruto. Evidently. You were a thorn in our side back at Las Noches. It would be illogical of us to assist you. He said, breaking the contact with Ichigo's sword. Ichigo looked at him dangerously. Get out of my way, Ulquiorra. I need to reach Naruto. I cannot do that. Then I'll force my way through. Ichigo roared, holding his butcher knife out. Bankai. Ugh. Stark grunted as he was pushed back by Minato. He had ordered Lillinette to get behind him while he fought the Shinigami, and he had not allowed him to get to her. Both he and Minato remained in their sealed state, but Stark was having trouble against the 5th Division captain regardless. Harabel was also having similar troubles over to the side, against Kushina. Stark. I know, Lillinette. This is getting to be far too much. I'm sorry, but it looks like we're going to have to go through with our pain in the ass release, he told his second half. Yeah, she called back. The blonde Shinigami in front of them raised an eyebrow, nonchalantly twirling his sealed Zanpakuto around in his hands. Our release. I didn't realize that Arrancar shared a Zanpakuto release. They don't. Most of them don't, at least. Most Arrancar, including those who have risen to become Espada level, seal the core of their powers into the form of a sword. But ours is a little bit different. When we release our Zanpakuto. He trailed off, as Lillinette came up beside him. We become one once more. He said, placing a hand upon her mask. Kick, Los Lobos. Minato watched nonchalantly as Stark was engulfed in a pillar of blue Ryatsu. Gleam, Kuroi Senko. Minato said softly, releasing his long blade of energy in order to combat Stark. Meanwhile, the dust surrounded Stark began to settle, and a blue Zero was fired out of the cloud almost immediately. Minato sliced it in half without a second thought. Oi, Lillinette! Don't fire without my permission. He was wide open, though. I'm not like you, who just wants to take a nap and not do anything. There was a crack, and a loud ow resounded throughout the high road as Stark emerged from the cloud and landed on the ground. Lillinette was nowhere to be seen. Just shut up. This pain in the ass release needs you to act like a normal gun and only fire when told. Stark said. He was talking to the pistol in his right hand. Minato narrowed his eyes. This was the first time he had seen an Arrancar's resurrection, but he had thought it would be more hollow-like. Other than the hole in his chest and mask eye patch, there wasn't really much that distinguished him for a hollow. Though, those fur leggings he wore reminded him of a wolf's, and may very well be tied to his hollow form. An interesting release. Am I correct in assuming those pistols are your other half? Minato asked. Stark didn't dignify him with a response, instead, raising his right pistol at him. Another strong blue Zero rocketed at the 5th Division's captain, though Minato was quick. Kami no Kyutai! Minato shouted. The tip of his Zanpakuto glistened with yellow light, before a yellow ball similar to a Zero broke off from the rest of his sword. Whichever direction Minato swung his sword, that was the direction that the orb would travel. And it seemed to be made of a very malleable type of energy, as it sometimes broke off into tiny blips of light. When Stark rapid-fired a bunch of Zeros at him, Minato swung his sword and the several blips of light intercepted the blue Zeros. After the sequence was done, Minato conjured up another deity's orb from his sword to place the old one. You call my release interesting, but it seems that your sword does a similar thing. Stark called, using Sonido to get underneath Minato's guard. The former Hokage was slightly faster than him though, and Stark was forced to flip over a counterattack from Minato's beam sword. Stark fired twin Zeros to dismantle the stream of energy that continued flying at him, planting his feet on the ground after he landed. Stark, you suck. You can't even keep up with him. Lillinette said. Just shut up and keep shooting. Stark shot back, firing several more times at Minato. The captain avoided them every time, before opting to try his luck with close-quarters combat. He swung his energy sword at Stark from close range, figuring the Arrancar would be woefully unprepared due to his weapon choice. That wasn't the case, as Stark swiftly holstered his pistols and retracted two blue energy swords out of thin air. He met Minato midway with his right sword, ducking to the side at the trail of Ryuryoku that came off Minato's blade. He noticed the deity's orb behind his head a little too late. Like how he had done to many different opponents, the point-blank beam grazed him on the back as he tried to avoid it, creating a shallow wound. TCH, he hissed, gritting his teeth. His energy swords disappeared, and Minato was ripe for the opportunity and the opening that the wound created. But Stark was quick, and he drew his pistols, firing twin Zeros at Minato, who was the middle of his attacking motion. Minato's Zanpakuto wasn't known for its defensive qualities, but it managed to redirect the majority of the Zeros. But the bright light had disoriented Minato, and now the tables were turned. Without even thinking, he swung his Zanpakuto in a sweeping motion behind himself, creating another trail of yellow energy. Based on the sound, he knew he had hit Stark, and he had swung his sword based on how he heard movement. Man, do you ever drop your guard? The Arrancar asked in an annoyed tone, as Minato turned around. There was another wound on Stark, this time over his leggings. Minato smiled. I won't, not until you let me get past. Stark seemed to regard his words for a moment, before he sighed. Ugh, this isn't getting us anywhere. Our fighting styles are far too similar. If I fire a Zero at you, you'll just counter it with that ball of light and vice versa. We need something to shake up the tides a bit. What do you suggest? Minato asked. Stark said nothing. At least, he did not say anything to Minato. Well, Lilith, let's put away the guns for a little while. Looks like we have no choice but to use the wolves. Attack, Tiburon. Like her Espada comrade off to the side of the bridge, Harabelle had been having quite some difficulty with her own opponent, one Uzumaki Kushina of the 3rd Division. The 3rd Division captain fought nothing like her husband, doing a flurry of wild and reckless sword attacks that focused on nothing but offensive capability. Kushina had been attacking her earlier, but the Shinigami had been pushed back by the cascade of water that went along every time Harabelle released her Zanpakuto. Usually when an Arrancar released their Zanpakuto, then their armor or clothing expanded. However, in the case of Harabelle, it was the opposite, and she became more streamlined. The bony hollow armor that covered Harabelle's body was very minimalist, covering only her breasts and crotch, with twin spikes protruding out of her shoulders. Even her face mask was mostly gone now, but she did have arm and leg guards to make up for it. In her right arm was an enormous blade that served as her main weapon, and it took the shape of a massive shark's fin with a hole in the center that was the shark's eye. Damn, honey, you look like a whore. Are you sure you don't just want to let me by? An obnoxious voice that belonged to Kushina told her from about 20 feet away. Outside of battle, Kushina was generally a pretty affable woman, but in combat, she was downright merciless. I'm afraid I cannot do that. I can't allow you to enter the Greater Palace and reach Naruto. Harabelle told her. Kushina shook her head wistfully, making humming noises with her mouth. Such a shame. And you have such a pretty face. But, if you're so insistent. She trailed off. Her sword was a katana with a blood-red hilt, and she was currently twirling it around in her hands. Puncture, Akashi. Almost immediately, Kushina's blade exploded in a burst of blood-red Ryatsu. After the display, Harabelle began to notice that the water around her was beginning to heat up, rapidly reaching its boiling point. Kushina grinned almost demonically as the red wreath gave her the visage of some kind of devil. She was waving her bladeless Zanpakuto around, but her shurikai was beginning to materialize. For one, the hilt and guard also began to disappear as the rest of the shurikai began to form. But Harabelle raised an eyebrow when all that happened was what looked like a puddle of blood materialized out of thin air and splattered all against the ground. Is this some kind of joke? She asked. As much as I love pranks, no. This is no time to be pulling pranks. I'm afraid I am very serious right now. Kushina shot back. She looked ridiculous when she shot her hand out, concentrating on the puddle of blood in front of her. Ryatsu welled up from within its depths, and the blood began to rise as if it were being controlled. Kushina wiggled her fingers and moved her hands around somewhat, and the now fully formed stream of blood responded like a whip, moving around in every which direction. What is that? Harabelle asked, while Kushina twirled the blood whip around her head. Kushina just hummed a happy little tune, before she lashed out with the whip. Harabelle responded in turn, spewing a vicious jet of water to protect herself. Lo and behold though, the water began to boil until it had completely turned into the steam, and Harabelle was forced to dodge on her own. Yet, when the blood whip impacted the ground, the stone bridge began to melt, until it became liquid. It's boiling, just like my Hirviende. But it looks like she has a far greater sense of control over that whip. Harabelle thought to herself. Kushina had retracted her whip back into the puddle by her feet though. What's wrong? Is it getting a little too hot for you? She asked. Harabelle said nothing, instead just raising her shark fin sword. Cascada. A torrent of water rose overhead in a streaming pillar, ready to topple across the battlefield and onto Kushina. When it was clear the attack was going to hit, Kushina did some more trickery with the magic puddle of blood at her feet. She twirled the whip over her head, before expanding it outward, forming a sort of umbrella over Kushina. The blood was hot enough to boil the water away into steam upon contact, leaving Harabelle's attack completely wasted. Harabelle herself touched back down onto the ground. That liquid is boiling at an extremely high temperature. Anything less would not be able to boil my cascada down to steam. She commented, suddenly very wary of the abilities of Kushina's Shirkai. That's right. And it will only get worse for you from here on end. Kushina said dangerously, forming the stream of blood back into its default whip-like shape. Shuketsu. Kushina controlled the blood whip to form a stream around Haribel, propelling around her and preventing any movement or escape. The Quinta watched on with sullen eyes, pondering what her opponent was playing at. After that was done, the blood whip hung over her head like an ominous rain cloud, and dispersed into several droplets of the boiling blood, which rained down upon the espada. Haribel got out of the way too little too late. Although she managed to avoid most of the lethal droplets, a few managed to find their way onto her body at various places. One on her right leg, one on her hip, and one more on her right shoulder. Haribel winced in pain as the hot blood began to burn her skin, but she was even more alarmed when she saw the blood begin to seep underneath her pores and into her body. And it continued to burn her muscles. Ugh, she cried in pain, as she felt herself begin to bleed underneath her skin, creating multiple bruises and splotches over where the drops had leaked into her body. Those droplets of blood are practically poison to your body. They will tear down your muscles until they are completely useless. Kushina told the Arankar. It burned Haribel badly, but she wasn't done just yet. Using her shark fin blade, she cut rough patches of her own body out, releasing the deadly blood while also seriously injuring herself. A smart move, though it won't be enough. Haribel didn't say anything, but she charged Kushina. Getting into a close-quarters battle might favor her, though Kushina blocked several strikes and pressurized jets of water when extreme skill with her bloody whip. When the whip made contact with Haribel's fin, the bony material that made up the sword began to fizzle and burn, actually catching fire. Haribel grit her teeth as the fire spread, though she did not give up. Despite the burning, she followed with several quick and nimble strikes with the burning weapon, one of them catching Kushina's hip and searing her flesh. The 3rd Division captain hissed and backed off, her blood whip retreating into the puddle as she clutched her burn wound. Haribel also backed off, trying to find some way to put out the fire. She called water up from her shark sword, dousing the flames while wincing at the wound that had been created. She had at least been able to inflict a wound and slow down Kushina. I understand now. It will not be an easy task defeating you. And so, I will use my full abilities. She raised her shark fin, and bring you to Naruto. She finished. Yellow Ryatsu surrounded her entire form. Resurrección, segunda etapa, Tiburón. These are some informations about espadas and Konoha association. Current espada. First, Naruto Uzumaki. Second, Ulquiorra Cipher. Third, Coyote Stark. Fourth, Barragan Lizenbairn, deceased. Fifth, Tia Haribel. Sixth, Neutra Gilga. Seventh, Grimjow Jigerjax. Eighth, Zamari Ruros, deceased. Ninth, Sail Aporo Grands, deceased. 10th, Yami Largo, deceased. Konoha Association. Namikaze Minato, 5th Division Captain. Uzumaki Kushina, 3rd Division Captain. Jiraiya, 9th Division Captain. Hataki Kakashi, 5th Division Vice Captain, deceased. Rin, 3rd Division Vice Captain, Captain level. Tsunade, 4th Division Vice Captain, Captain level. Hyuga Hinata, 13th Division Vice Captain, deceased. Nara Shikamaru, 8th Division, 3rd seat, above Vice Captain level. Inazuka Kiba, 7th Division, 4th seat, Vice Captain level. Hyuga Niji, 6th Division, 3rd seat, above Vice Captain level. Yamanaka Ino, 10th Division, 3rd seat, Vice Captain level. A tidal wave of water cascaded onto the battlefield as Haribel activated her second release. Kushina was impressed. She didn't think the girl had it in her to produce such a high-level Ryatsu. What was her rank again amongst the espada? 5th? Naruto had found himself some very powerful allies. Harabelle was in the center of it all, engulfed in a ball of water at the center of her release. Another wave broke off and nearly drowned Kushina, but it missed her by just a few feet. After that, Harabelle emerged from the center of the water. She was somewhat different than her previous incarnation. She was dressed skimpily before, but her second release toned down even more on the amount of clothing that she wore. Her bony shark skirt had been toned down to nothing more than a line of bone covering her womanhood, and her breasts were almost completely out in full display, her nipples being covered by nothing more than 2 bony dots. Her massive shark sword was gone at this point, but her arm and leg guards remained in place, though they were slightly larger and seemed a bit more protective. In both of her hands, she clutched a miniature version of her blade, her hands grasping firmly around the handle, and the face of the blade pointing at Kushina. "Aguja," she whispered, squeezing down the twin handles on her shark blades. Highly pressurized water came shooting from the edge of the shark blades, jettisoning like a needle at deadly speeds at Kushina. It was almost like a laser, and as Kushina got out of the way, it cut a fine hole into the stone ground in that it hit, with an intense amount of accuracy and precision. She fired twin streams of Aguja, creating twin cutters that surged towards Kushina at opposite angles, attempting to close her in and slice her to bits. The captain saw this, and used Shuunpa to hang around in mid-air for a moment while the streams passed. Meanwhile, Harabelle had flashed out of existence using Sonido. She was a great deal faster in her Segunda Etapa. She's harder to keep up with. Where is she? Kushina asked herself, eyes scanning the battlefield for any signs of the Quinta. There was then a flash from behind her, and Harabelle had formed a highly pressurized blade of water from the tip of her blade. The Quinta cut into Kushina's shoulder, but Kushina raised the default form of her Zanpakuto up in time to be able to block the full attack. Nevertheless, she was getting roughed up in the fight now, and the momentum was beginning to shift in Harabelle's favor. She hoped she wouldn't have to use her Bankai to finish the fight, especially in such an unstable environment. "Ryuketsu Odori!" Kushina roared, twirling the whip above her head. Harabelle raised another eyebrow as Kushina began dancing about in an erratic pattern, swinging her whip around. Yet, on the inside, this display was one of precision and no wasted movements. Kushina fluttered through the air, her whip at her side, wasting no time in attempting to strike Harabelle multiple times with her whip. Harabelle was a bit too fast at this point to fall for such a simple trick, and every strike Kushina attempted to perform was countered by a blast of water from the tip of Harabelle's blade. "La Gata!" Harabelle muttered, firing another one in Kushina's direction. The woman boiled away the water using manipulation of the blood puddle. That was a pretty basic attack for such an advanced Aaronkar. Harabelle just seemed to view that attack as a distraction, however, as she once again tried to go for the close-quarters combat against Kushina, appearing in front of her and trying to draw her away from the puddle of blood. She seemed to know that it was her life force during her released state. And with the way things were going, it looked like Harabelle was putting enough distance between her and the puddle of blood. Her strikes were quick and strong, and she put her body in between her and Kushina's shurikai, so if the woman wanted to get there, she would have to pass through Harabelle first. Harabelle continued to swing her shark sword, with Kushina dodging every step of the way. She was getting forced back, but luckily there was a point where Harabelle fired twin jets of water that Kushina was able to front vault directly over. She shot out with a kick to Harabelle's back, which was near useless against the Quinta Zero, but the point was clear. She could get right back over to the puddle without Harabelle obstructing her. "I get it now. My shurikai is very limited when it comes to fighting you. You will inevitably attempt to draw me away from the radius where I can control my shurikai. It is the main weakness of my Zanpakuto. And your attacks are far too strong and quick for me to fight while stationary. This is why." She trailed off. "What will you do now then?" Harabelle asked. "I will take this battle to the next level," Kushina said ominously. She walked directly into the middle of the puddle, to the point where blood was soaking the bottom of her shoes. Her body and the blood glowed a deep red. Bankai. Several droplets of blood rose up from within the depths of the puddle, passing and framing Kushina's face as they rose into the sky. Soon, it became a torrent, and the blood droplets defied gravity. It was like a torrent of rain pouring into the sky from the ground, with Kushina standing in the exact center of the storm. She thrust her arms out, drenching herself even further in the blood. The blood was bending itself around her, cloaking her in a wet, bloody shawl. It almost looked like Akashi no Hanawa. The puddle was now covering Kushina's entire body, save for her face. It was a robe in a way with the flowing blood and hood, and she looked like a divine goddess of death ready to reap the souls of the damned. Fitting for the former Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Haribel, normally the picture of stoicism, even felt a bead of sweat run down her cheek. She shakily rose her sword over the intimidating demon goddess in front of her, and she mustered up the strength to attack. "I will give you 5 seconds to repent," Kushina said eerily, her blood cloak flowing. Haribel fired a jet of pressurized water at Kushina, but the blood cloak was even hotter than before. It was scalding, and the water boiled away before it could even touch Kushina. Kushina looked solemn, before she reached out a long, blood-cloaked arm towards Haribel. The female Arrancar winced as the appendage slowly came towards her, but she easily used Sonido to get away. "Pantano," she yelled, for once in her life losing her cool. She crossed her twin blades, producing a massive stream of water from their tips that shot forward like a tidal wave. Kushina regarded the crashing wave rapidly coming down upon her coolly, even as its crest threatened to overtake her. Using Shuinpa, she simply leapt into the air, coming down on the top of the crest and boiling a portion of it away. She was standing upon the water. La Gata! Haribel fired another war drop, though Kushina simply reached out her hand and boiled the water without a second thought. Haribel just hung out in the air for a few seconds longer, before Kushina spoke. Tenbatsu! Kushina had used her Bankai's special ability, and it was somewhat similar to Haribel's Pantano. The cloak rose off of Kushina's body, jettisoning out like a tidal wave of boiling blood. Kushina stood at the crest, once again looking like a goddess prepared to perform judgment on the heathen hollows. Haribel grunted as the tidal wave of blood engulfed her, crashing down onto the stone bridge below, bringing the Quinta Espada along with the tidal wave. Kushina did not even blink. Once again cloaked, Kushina practically floated back down onto the stone bridge as the boiling wave of blood dissipated, and Haribel was left in a broken state in the aftermath. It was a grisly affair. The blood had practically boiled her alive, even getting past the Arrancar's strong Yarrow defenses. She was literally steaming as her flesh was cooked underneath the intense heat, and there were several cracks in whatever plating she had left in wake of her second release. Yet, the look on her face was not one of complete agony. She was brushing off the pain as if it were nothing, trying to approach her inevitable death with some kind of dignity. Kushina regarded her coolly, showing no signs of either pity or triumph on her face. She wasn't one to bask in Haribel's defeat, especially not when the situation was so dire. "You win. After all these years, it looks like my time serving Naruto has come to an end. Hurry, you have beaten me, and have earned the right to see Naruto. Now, please, leave me," Haribel stated. Kushina's Bankai cloak faded, and she once again did not say another word. She didn't even bother with finishing off Haribel as well, but with those wounds, the Quinta would be dead soon enough. All that was left now was for her husband to finish. Maybe she would need to assist him. Minato had been having a little bit of a tougher time fighting Stark than his wife had fighting Haribel. The two combatants were fairly even with Stark in his release and Minato using his Shurikai, but the Arrancar had just opened up the window a little bit more. It had all started when Stark's Ryatsu began to spike, and the ends of his guns began to glow with his usual light blue Ryatsu. He mentioned that it was time to use the wolves, but Minato didn't know what that meant. Until the emissions of Ryatsu from out the back of his guns began to take on shapes and sizes. They were a metallic, silvery blue when it came to color, but what was more interesting is what they resembled. Wolves? Minato told himself, watching the lupin balls of energy before him. He could tell already that they were not real wolves, instead simply being constructs made of Ryuryoku. But he still didn't even know what they did. That's right. But you don't need to know about them behind the fact that they're my faithful companions. Everything else will become clear to you in due time. Stark said, pointing a pistol at him. The wolves then attacked. They rushed Minato in a fairly predictable manner, but Stark didn't send all of them to attack at once. Nevertheless, Minato took his stance to meet them midway, swinging his shuriken to offset them. A few of them tried to bite his ankles, but he avoided them by slicing clean through one that was heading directly at him from the front. The other two crashed into each other head-on as Minato stepped forward, but they were acting strange now. They were starting to deform out of their lupin shape and reform back into the blue Ryuryoku that they were before. But the strange sound that came with it was very familiar to Minato. Oh, sure. He had fallen right into their trap. When he had cut the wolf, it emitted a blast not unlike a Zero, which nearly caught up Minato in its range. When he stepped back, the two that had run into each other also exploded into their former Zero form, which created twice the blast and singed Minato's back when he was caught off guard. And the next pack of them was already heading after him, even before he recovered fully. The group of 10 or so wolves were running at him in midair, each of them branching out when they got too close to him. Minato considered slicing them once again, but with the way they exploded upon contact, he figured that wasn't the smartest thing for him to do. Perhaps he should go straight to the source. Stark seemed to be contemplating something as he sent his wolves out to attack, because he didn't seem to be paying any attention to the way Minato was battling. That allowed Minato himself to get the drop on Stark, but the Tercera Espada wouldn't go down that easily. Whoa there! Stark said, jumping backwards to avoid the strike from Minato. Minato had assumed that in order to control the wolves, Stark had to be relatively focused and motionless, but clearly that wasn't the case. Creating the wolves had a bit of a drawback though, in the form that Stark couldn't exactly use his pistols for regular Zeros at this point, at least until he dispelled the wolves completely. As I thought. Minato said to himself, attacking Stark once more. As you thought, what? Stark asked, none too amused as he avoided another strike from Minato's shuriken. Minato seemed to be fully focused on him right now, for better or for worse, but he couldn't rely on Stark being this defensive for very long. I thought it was strange that you were just standing there while you created these wolves. When they attacked me, you did not attempt to shoot me with your pistol or try any other technique that you might have up your sleeve. Which can only mean one thing. Stark didn't say anything. When you create these wolves, anything else you try to do with those pistols is disabled, and you are left near helpless. If Stark was worried that Minato supposedly figured out his big weakness when using the wolves, he didn't show it. He was adept enough to avoid anything that Minato was able to throw at him for the time being, but he also proved he could more than fight back when he directed one of the wolves to get directly in between himself and the 5th Division's captain. What's your point? He said. In fact, one of the things that Minato noticed while fighting with the wolves was that Lilynette was no longer speaking. Was she necessary to use the pistols? I hope you don't plan to keep this up for very long. We're doing nothing but wasting each other's time if you're trying to attack me with such a simple strategy. Stark said. Minato didn't say anything, but he held his free hand out as if he were making an incantation. Bakudo number 63, Saju Sabaku. Stark instantly knew what Minato was trying to do. With the wolves constantly getting in the way and Minato trying to get him with his shuriken, Stark's moving about was making that difficulty. Hence, the use of Bakudo would rectify that problem. Too bad it was fairly easy to see through. What Minato tried was a fairly stable Bakudo spell to try and bind him in place within a medium such as a wall. That meant that a spell like Saju Sabaku would allow for a long, yellow coil of Ryuryoku to bind Stark in place. If the Tercera would remain stationary, this is Bakudo number 63, Saju Sabaku. Now, it wasn't making much sense to Stark. Bakudo number 63, Saju Sabaku. Minato was going to wear himself down at this point. Bakudo number 63, Saju Sabaku. When the fourth coil of Bakudo magic was a little bit different than the rest of them, Stark finally figured out what Minato's plan was. The coil from the Bakudo and the energy trail that Minato's sword made when he swung it were the exact same shade of yellow. When Minato had been chanting Kido, he had swung his sword faster than Stark could pick up, and there were now a little more than a dozen coils of Kido heading straight toward him. And he couldn't afford to get hit by any one of them. At best, he would be bound by the coil of yellow rope, and at worst he would take damage from one of Minato's sword strikes. He used his wolves to keep Minato's attacks at bay, but he was making more, and the wolves could only work for so long when he had such a limited number of them. Eventually, he would have to pull out and make some more. He stepped onto the ground, and made his first error when a yellow coil that had been in Stark's blind spot wrapped around his ankle, before going up his body and binding him. "Stark! What did you do?" Lilynette said, finally back in the pistol after having her soul split for the wolves. Stark grit his teeth, before slapping the pistol against his head. "Just shut up and start firing. The wolves didn't work, and it looks like we may need to go into our second stage," Stark called. "What? Do we have to?" Lilynette whined, as Minato touched down right beside them, his sword still out as if he were poised to give the finishing blow to the Arrancar. "What were you just discussing?" he asked. "I hope it doesn't involve trying to escape." "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I've already used up enough time as it is. I need to see my son," he said. "Don't worry," Stark said. "This won't take much more time. I can assure you of that. I'm not going to let you take any chances on this. The time for conversation is over. You have been caught. Surrender quietly and lead me to Naruto and you will be let off easy," Minato said, giving an ultimatum. Stark chuckled. "Man, that would be just so great right now. If I surrender to you, I could be back at home right now taking a nap. I'm serious, this fighting stuff doesn't jive with me. Anything that gets me out of more fighting would be a plus in my book." "But," he trailed off after that long-dreaded "but." "I don't think I can do that right now. The boss is in the middle of the crowning achievement of his life, even if it doesn't really do it for me. I can't just sit by and let you walk all over me right now. I won't let you," Minato roared, preparing to take a swing at Stark. He was much too late. "Resurrección, segunda etapa, Los Lobos," Stark cried, cracking his right pistol against his head. There was an explosion of light blue Reiatsu as the pistol began to lose its shape. With the Reiatsu increasing, the Kido that Minato had Stark underneath could no longer withhold a fully released Tercera Espada, and the binds gave way. The Reiatsu was strong enough to give Minato the chills, and it wasn't done growing just yet. Minato wasn't surprised that Stark had a second release under his sleeve, but he was kicking himself for hesitating far too much when it came to having Stark captive. That feeling increased doubly when he felt Stark's Reiatsu split into something completely different. He knew that the Arrancar mentioned that in order to release, his other half joined with him for them to become one. Did his second release split them apart again? What's the meaning of this? If your second release just gets rid of your pistols with no other apparent changes, then I don't see how you're supposed to have gotten stronger from it, he mentioned to Stark, who was just standing there, gunless. "I will show you what happens when the wolf becomes the rider." That was the only thing that Stark said to his opponent. When Minato took his eyes off Stark, there was a flash of movement. Just like how Lilynette had disappeared into a burst of Reiatsu when she and Stark released their Zanpakuto, she reappeared in one when they activated their second release. "Ha!" Minato asked himself. Lilynette was now a little bit different. Yet, Minato wasn't even able to register anything like that, because before he knew it, he had gotten kicked in the face by what seemed to be a strong set of hooves. The former Hokage flew backwards, his durability working wonders for him, but he was still unable to avoid minor injuries to the face. Whatever had hit him was fast. Fast enough to get the jump on the reflexes of a powerful captain, as well as deliver a strong blow to the face. "Stark! You know I don't like it when we do this. That was Lillinette's voice. The gunless Stark didn't seem surprised. Just deal with it for a while. We need to go into this state if we want to win. Stark was looking at Lillinette, but Minato saw where the clear changes went to with regards to the pair's second release. Lillinette was not a pair of pistols anymore. If anything, this looked like something that could be considered a normal resurrection for her. In fact, Lillinette looked like the very definition of a centaur, but those weren't the only changes. For starters, she was large. Very large, like the size of an incredibly large horse from back in the human world. Her horse-like half was pure white in color, from the clear hollow armor. A light green tail, the same color as her hair, had grown out of her rear end. Her human half was striking as well. Gone was the little girl who had clearly been the load of the pair of Espada, and in its place was a girl who seemed to be in late teens, with all the development that entailed as well. Her womanly face notwithstanding, the mask fragment she wore when unreleased was completely gone now, and her strange colored hair had grown much longer, framing down her sides. The only clothing she wore was a black band that covered her torso, and the elbow bands that were on her arms. It was clear the purpose she formed, when Stark climbed upon her back as if she were a mount. Okay, let's do this. Stark, she told her other half, Stark's clothes, giving him the very impression of a cowboy on a horse, yet he was the wolf who had become the rider. The pistols that she had once been were in holsters along her side, and Stark drew one of them, keeping a grip on Lillinette's hair as a sort of rein. If she was uncomfortable, she didn't show it. An interesting combination. Minato said. He was already getting up to fight, his shuriken waving around. Stark didn't say anything, keeping a grip on Lillinette as he starting rapid-firing Siros. 7 of them impacted the ground before Minato, but a quick Shunpa had saved him from being blasted by them. Stark saw where he was going to go before Minato even knew it, and Lillinette was fastly approaching where Minato had telegraphed his movements. Lillinette tried to snap out with a vicious kick with her hooves, but Minato swung, and Stark corralled her at the last second before the hooves were loped off, and fired 3 quick bursts of Siro. They were blocked by Minato, and Lillinette reared back. The Siros were somehow stronger in this form than they were before, and Lillinette was as mobile as could be. Minato sensed an apparent weakness in the tandem attack of the two, Lillinette's legs. With stunning speed, he surprised Lillinette, attempting to hack off her front legs. But Stark was clearly the brains of the operation, and was determined to keep him at bay. Siro Metrolita. Kami no Kyutai. Minato responded, summoning the ball of light from her sword once again. Minato was unprepared for the onslaught of Siros that came out of Stark's gun, but he split the deity's orb into multiple fragments, and used those to intercept many of the Siros. Minato once again found himself on the defensive as it became clear that his deity's orbs were nowhere near enough to stop the multitude of Siros that were heading his way, and the captain found himself forced to use his highest level Shunpa to begin avoiding them all. Isn't this unfair? Minato called back to the mounted Stark. No, it's not. If you get to use those orbs of yours, then I get to use this technique. He fired back. The attack was overkill though, as it seemed that he was firing hundreds of Siro from just one pistol. It took his strongest Shunpa, but Minato managed to make it out of that storm of Siro without even being singed by one of the deadly beams, though it was a true testament to how advanced his flash steps actually were. Minato looked beyond the battlefield. The bridge they were standing on was large enough and wide enough to accommodate the level of battle he was currently fighting, and then some. Over on the other side, he had seen his wife activate her Bankai. Considering she didn't really like to do that female Arrancar must have been a frightening opponent. And considering the circumstances, he might have to copy his wife. Don't you have something else up your sleeve? Lillinette said. The Arrancar girl turned centaur was getting bored and tired doing her job. She wanted something else. Your Bankai, maybe, she finished, and it was clear that she was goading Minato on. And he had to be the stupidest person ever, he thought to himself, because he was going to take the bait. Don't worry. I won't hold back any more, Minato said. Bankai. There was an explosion of Ryatsu strong enough to nearly knock Stark off of his mount, and Lilith reared up in surprise at the sight of the lightning-based Ryatsu that nearly bowled her over when a wave of it came jolting her way. Kinten no Raijin. A pillar of thunder and lightning crashed onto the bridge, directly on top of Minato himself. He threw his shuriken up into the stream of electricity as it engulfed him, and Stark realized that the stream of lightning wasn't harming the 5th Division's captain in the slightest. In fact, Minato was riding the stream of lightning as if he were a storm deity ascending into the heavens. Stark! Do something! Stark didn't need to be told twice, which was surprising considering his usual motivation. With his strong pistol, he fired several shots into the stream of lightning, trying to clip Minato before he could ascend fully. No, you idiot! Don't just fire a few zeros into that thing. Use one of the other techniques, and use them quickly. We're going, Lilith demanded, for once holding all the cards. She began galloping directly into the center, toward the stream of lightning. It was too late, however. The stream of lightning began to deform and disperse, and there was an explosion of Ryatsu as the lightning began to take shape into something completely new. Minato's Bankai had taken the form of a cloud of pure lightning about 20 feet in diameter that hung throughout midair. Minato himself was walking along it as if it were solid, neither phasing through it or being electrocuted. Stark didn't want to wait and find out what the effects of that thing would be on him. Don't just stand there like an idiot, Stark. Use it, Lilith said, snapping Stark out of his stupor while galloping around any excess lightning that may harm the 2 Aaronkar. Yeah, I got it, Stark said, hoisting his pistol. Zero cannon, he roared, as a blip of blue light materialized at the edge of Stark's gun. The ball of light began to expand further and further, until Stark fired an enormous zero from his gun that sounded exactly like a cannon being fired. The gigantic ball of energy hurled itself towards Minato's Bankai cloud, and the captain watched on impassively at the Tercera's feeble attempts to stop his Bankai. I'll give you 5 seconds, before passing down judgment upon you as a Shinigami, he whispered, so low that Stark couldn't hear him anyway. He picked up his shuriken, which was now nothing more than a hilt and a guard. But, from atop of his perch, he swung it, and any and all targets down below would get fried. Stark knew what was going to happen when the gigantic zero failed to stop the cloud of lightning, even if it did create a sizable hole in it. Minato was clearly unharmed, however. Lilith, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry I dragged you into this, he said. His steed turned her neck to look at him with confusion, but he could see a bit of resignation in the normally cheerful girl's visage. Stark, what are you talking about? I'm just glad you could see me through all to the end. I wouldn't do this over, never again. I'm happy that I'm not alone. I was never alone, even when I thought I was. Lilith had stopped moving, and Stark holstered his gun. But, we need to know when to fold, He looked overhead, to the giant cloud that was being charged with electricity. Namikaze Minato was looking over them as if he were an angry god ready to give judgment. In a way, it was remarkably similar to Kushina's Bankai. Within his protective cloud, Minato did something with his sword hilt, and managed to summon forth an intense bolt of lightning, which he managed to directly at the 2 Aaronkar and single espada. Stark and Lilith felt a bright light enter their vision, followed by a burning sensation. They did not attempt to fight it. He's fast. Shikamaru pointed out the obvious as Jiraiya attempted to hold off the Septima Espada, with Niji backing up the former Sannin of Konoha. Shikamaru hadn't taken action yet, but at this rate, he may have to stop with the strategies and enter the fray. What is this stuff anyway? The Aaronkar said, pausing in his approaching to look at the substance that had gotten on his arm. His opponents were far more concerned with him, though. He had released his Zanpakuto, and the once panther-like hollow went back to being panther-like. Like always, his hair had grown out significantly, with his face taking on feline characteristics. He was coated in protective white armor that was slender and form-fitting, and altogether gave him the appearance of a jungle cat. Oh, well. It can't be that important, considering you guys are about to lose. Grimmjow guffawed, speeding around with his Sonido. The three Shinigami were on edge. This Arrancar never stopped using his superior speed to get the edge on them, and even now he was flashing around them while firing his elbow darts at them. Get behind me! Jiraiya shouted, as Neji and Shikamaru did what they were told. Grimmjow fired several elbow darts at them, which Jiraiya used his sword to redirect them with some effort. He had left an opening though, and Grimmjow used the opportunity to speed right into the middle of things, and he cracked out with a paw which connected with Jiraiya's jaw. Don't try to protect these weaklings. Those words got him a trident to the neck, but Grimmjow was far too reckless to let Neji's Shurikai slow him down, and he lashed out with more paws as he took out both Neji and Shikamaru along with them. Over on the other side, Tsunade and company were not having better luck with Neutra. When the Sexta had released his Zanpakuto, he had grown another pair of arms along with two horns that looked like crescent moons. And from those arms were four sinister-looking sides that made him the pinnacle of close-quarters combat along with strong Iero. Yet, the Arrancar was getting very frustrated when it came to the wonders of Tsunade's Shurikai. He had just inflicted a powerful wound onto Kiba once again, but thanks to the plant on his back, he was perfectly fine in no time at all. Kiba's Shurikai was a twin-bladed katana that resembled two dogs' tails, but it was nothing more than a standard physical-type Zanpakuto without any special abilities. Neutra had had no trouble keeping Kiba at bay. Yet when he administered more wounds to Rin and kept suffering from the sound effects of her Zanpakuto, Neutra had had enough. With all four of sides swinging, he attacked Tsunade, who had been inactive the entire fight while keeping her team alive. Minato did not feel like celebrating his victory over the apparent Tercera Espada. He looked over at his wife, who was approaching him quickly. She had apparently finished up her battle with the Quinta Espada, in a manner similar to himself. Once they had activated their Bankai, it was over far too easily. The battle waged on below, and Minato had to wonder when it would ever end. There were so many hollows down there, but a member of the Royal Guard could keep them at bay for a very long time. They were just the distraction though. Naruto was probably already within the Greater Palace. Honey, what do we do now? Everyone else is still down there. Kushina told him, pointed a well-manicured finger down below towards the massive horde of hollows. A couple of Espada were down there too, which meant that they were likely involved in a fight down there. I think you know what we need to do now. Believe in our friends, they'll be fine, but we need to go after Naruto right away. If my hunch is correct, he'll have already breached the palace by now with the time that we've already lost. Didn't Ichigo-san head that way? Kushina asked. You're right. If the time past is any indication, he should have also breached the Greater Palace and confronted Naruto. However, I'm skeptical in his abilities in being able to put a stop to Naruto. I don't know how long he can hold him. The Greater Soul King Palace loomed ahead of them. Within there, they would find Naruto. For better or for worse. And both parents understood what they had to do now. Let's go, Minato. Kushina said, already taking the lead as she bolted toward the palace. Minato hesitated for just a few seconds longer, before he took off after his wife, heading directly for the Greater Palace. Kurosaki Ichigo, even after years of evading us and generally being quiet in some depth of Huecomundo, you continue to baffle me. What would you have to gain by stopping Naruto? You have not seen anything other than the human world for over a decade. Ulquiorra said, as Ichigo activated his Bankai right in front of him. He had seen that familiar black cloak multiple times before, but this time Ulquiorra could tell that Ichigo's Bankai was several times more impressive than it was before. Let's just say, it's a personal issue, Ichigo said. But for all that's been done to me over the years, you're not the one who has been hurting my friends. If you just step aside, we could end this without fighting. And yet you use your Bankai the moment you see me. Your logic does not hold up, Kurosaki Ichigo. I know you would wish to fight me, but clearly you regard Naruto as the greater threat, and wished to get to him as soon as possible, Ulquiorra said. Nothing escapes you, Ulquiorra. Quite correct. That would of course include you. Ulquiorra's hand casually flew to the hilt of his sword, and he drew it carefully. Usually he always started fights using his fists, similar to many of his own kind, but he had the sudden feeling that this fight was going to require much more. Drawing your sword already? What a special honor! Ichigo said sarcastically. But, I can't say it isn't smart. You'd be right not to underestimate me now. I've spent over a decade in Huecamundo as a Shinigami. A moot point. Your kind may think that's impressive, but any hollow with adequate survival skills could last that long with the dangers of Huecamundo. But enough talk. Ichigo took that as a cue to attack, and he did. Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo started off the fight with his classic move, and frankly, Ulquiorra was disappointed. The Segunda thought that Ichigo would do more than just stagnate in his abilities during his stay in Huecamundo, but apparently he was wrong. Then, the entire thing randomly got stronger. When Ulquiorra tried to guard against the Getsuga Tensho, Ichigo managed to change the attack in mid-swing. Notably, Ulquiorra began to feel Ichigo's spiritual pressure getting heavier as he applied force, and the area of the attack was much greater than it used to be. Ulquiorra grunted as he was engulfed in the black Getsuga, and Ichigo stopped pressing the attack, waiting to see if Ulquiorra would use the darkness to strike unexpectedly. Ichigo's eyes scanned the battlefield as his honed instincts picked up on movement from directly over to his right, and the clear sound of a sonido rang out across the battlefield. Ichigo knew that attack. It was a favorite amongst Arrancar. With Ulquiorra's enhanced arrow, he would attempt to carve a hole straight into his opponent's chest, right over where his own hollow hole was. Ichigo wasn't about to let that happen, and he thrust his sword up quickly and blocked Ulquiorra's strike without even so much as flinching. He leapt over a kick from Ulquiorra's follow-up, before speeding behind him. Getsuga Tensho. He whispered. This time, the effect was far more concentrated, and there was no wasted movement or ryuryoku on Ichigo's part. It was smaller, but far more accurate, and it was prepared to carve its own hole in Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra was the Segunda Espada for a reason, however. Using his sword, he practically caught the small Getsuga on the tip of his blade, and then with a flick of the wrist, he simply propelled it back at Ichigo. Ichigo's reflexes were far too honed to fall for that, but Ulquiorra was prepared, and was already on the move once again. His analytical eyes were scanning the area, seeing how Ichigo sped across the battlefield. When he saw the pattern, he took off using his own sonido. His Bankai is faster. More importantly, his Ryatsu isn't fluctuating as much anymore. There are no longer any times where it plummets or raises, and is at a fairly stable platform instead. Ulquiorra thought. Still, it wasn't enough to stop him. Once he was in the right position, Ulquiorra's hand reached out and charged up a green Siro, to which he released at a surprised-looked Ichigo who was clearly wondering how Ulquiorra was keeping up with him. HNN. Ichigo grunted, as he pulled back as fast as he could. Ulquiorra released his fully charged Siro, and the acidic green ray flew across towards Ichigo, who knew that he was cornered. Yet, Ichigo didn't submit, or show any signs of fear from the deadly ray heading straight for him. Instead, he reached up to his face, without any hesitation, and pulled a white mask over it. So there it is. Ulquiorra commented. I've heard of stories about it, of how you're apparently able to imitate us, but this is a good chance for me to personally see it in action. The masked Ichigo didn't say anything, and Ulquiorra felt himself getting stared down by a familiar gaze that he was used to a long time ago. Some hollows in Huecamundo preferred not to talk. You still perplex me, Kurosaki Ichigo. Analysis of your Ryatsu would indicate that you are nowhere near the trash that you were 10 years ago, but your abilities seem remarkably stagnant. Has your time in Huecamundo really been so poor to you? Ulquiorra asked. Why don't you see for yourself if I've stagnated? Ichigo asked, his garbled voice sounding remarkably hollow-like. He then struck, and Ulquiorra was taken aback by how quickly he got behind him and swung, creating a torrent of black and red Ryatsu that Ulquiorra just managed to get his sword up to block. But he didn't escape without a crack appearing on his sealed Zanpakuto. Getsuga Tensho. Damn it. Before anything else could happen to his Zanpakuto, he sheathed it. He wasn't even going to bother trying to block a full-powered Getsuga Tensho with a cracked Zanpakuto, lest he risk losing it. He used Sonido, but it was too little, too late. Fortunately for Ulquiorra, he managed to get out of the blast in time to the point where it only partially engulfed him, and his Iero held up underneath the pressure to an extent. His chest was starting to bleed now though, and his Arankar robe had been ripped open slightly. And now that he had been injured, Ichigo was in no way relenting. Ulquiorra considered drawing his sword again, but instead opted to try and block Ichigo's sword strikes with his bare hands. The instant the blade touched his skin and made minor cuts, Ulquiorra knew that the strategy was not going to work. He pointed 2 fingers at Ichigo, and charged up 2 simultaneous zeros which he promptly fired at Ichigo. The first one Ichigo avoided by moving to the left, and the right one he damn near sliced in half. It's not gonna work, Ulquiorra. Don't you think it's about time you stopped messing around? We're not going to get anywhere with you doing these reckless attacks, Ichigo said. Your logic doesn't hold up again, Kurosaki Ichigo. The proper way to fight in battle is to continue to press the attack if you have the advantage, but you are doing nothing more than waiting for me to increase my power. Ichigo lowered his sword. Hueco Mundo did a lot of things to me, Ulquiorra, but one of the things that it didn't do is change who I truly am. I don't like the idea of doing things unfairly, even now. Ulquiorra placed a hand on his sword hip, drawing it. He eyed the crack on the edge of his sword solemnly, and he knew that he was outclassed by the Shinigami in his sealed state. Kurosaki Ichigo, you puzzle me completely. You always continue to confuse me with your regard over such meaningless things. Even now, I am unable to grasp the concept of what a heart is. However, if you won't take advantage of your battles, then I will oblige. Ichigo didn't change his expression underneath the mask, not even when Ulquiorra raised his Zanpakuto, and his Ryatsu began to increase at a high level. Things are going to get destructive. Normally, a spada at my rank would not be allowed to release, but given the circumstances and the fact we are in enemy territory, I can make an exception. In close, Murcielago. It looks like everyone's going wild down there now. Even Ulquiorra released his Zanpakuto. Sakura chuckled, savoring the increase in Ryatsu all across the dimension. That's to be expected. I'm worried about the Royal Guard members lurking around, and you told me that the members of this Konoha Association are strong. Anyway, that's not the point right now. Where's this guy hiding? Naruto shot back. The Spirit King, you mean? Well, his retainers have probably told him about the impending invasion, and have urged him to take shelter in a safe place. There's a secret passage behind the throne room that leads to a special chamber, and according to your special book, it's where you need to go. Sakura said. There was a pause for a moment, but Sakura wasn't done talking yet. I'm surprised. When all the Royal Guard members take their oath and are admitted into the division, they generally know all of the secrets that the Royal Palace has to offer, and anything that the Soul King controls. Yet this has been kept a secret from everyone. She trailed off. If you pull this off. I know. It's exactly the reason why the Soul King is my final, missing target. Let's go, bitch. Naruto said. Sakura chuckled. Whatever you say, hun. But before we go, just remember that the Soul King is no ordinary soul. He never takes action, but as a being he is something that not even we understand. Keep that in mind. Naruto stared Sakura down, his red eyes boring into her green ones. I know everything there is to know about the Soul King. It is detailed in El Libro de Ciclos to the full extent, when the legendary Hollow Reporo nearly changed the world. In that sense, I am already greater than that thing. Naruto said. Even Sakura found herself sweating slightly. Thanks to the efforts of the other Espada, Naruto and Sakura had managed to reach the Greater Soul King Palace while not being slowed down by fights at all. The Greater Soul King Palace was much larger than it looked while it hung in the sky. A 7-storied tower, the Soul King's quarters resided at the very top, while nearly every other room was a gargantuan hallway that was polished white to perfection. Sleek stone pillars decorated these hallways, and at the end of every one was a staircase that led to the next floor. Sakura kept up with Naruto as he rushed through the floors of the palace, darting upstairs with reckless abandon while knocking pictures and decorations off the walls as went. It was upon the 5th floor that they met one of the Soul King's retainers. He was a tall, skinny man that did not look like he was good at fighting. A white hooded robe covered his entire body, reminding Naruto of an Arrancar without a mask or a stigma. Intruder! The intruders have breached the Greater Palace, the retainer shrieked. As soon as Sakura came into view, the man became even more panicked, though there was a hint of confusion within his voice. Sakura-sama, what are you doing accompanying this intruder? Sakura was silent for a moment, before her face slowly split into an increasingly menacing smile, which the retainer took at face value given the look of terror on his face. No, you couldn't have. You took the oath. The oath doesn't mean much to me, kid. You see, the both of us here have really short tempers, and when we're mad, we tend to do some things that others would find unpleasant. Surely you don't want to see what I mean by that, right? She said sultrily. She didn't even bat an eyelash when the retainer exploded into a fountain of gore, courtesy of Naruto. He's close. I can feel it, if his retainers are here. Naruto said, wiping the blood off his arm. Sakura panned her eyes upward as they reached the 6th floor, toward the large gilded door at the end of the hallway, which was slightly open already. The Soul King's throne. Sakura said, as the two of them peered inside at will. No retainers were around, so it was likely that the king was being sheltered somewhere nearby. Sakura pointed upwards, to let Naruto bask in the strangeness. The throne room was just another portion of the hallway, which a small black pocket void in the center with a ray of white light about the size of a human body in the middle of the void. The secret passage is right here. The Soul King likes his illusions. Sakura said, as she stepped into the black void without a second thought. Once she entered, it was like any other portion of the palace, being made of white stone. Clearly, it was an illusion meant to make the Soul King seem more godlike to those who looked at him. She tapped around for a moment as Naruto stepped up beside her, and moved an ordinary tile forward to reveal a secret staircase that led down. I've read about this in the book. Apparently, there's a very special device that the Soul King controls hidden within the Greater Palace. It's the reason he's so vital to Soul Society. Naruto said, as he entered the torchlit staircase. Wow! Naruto said in awe when the dark hallway gave way to light and a much more open room. He was beginning to wonder how exactly the palace was able to hide something like this for so long from even the royal guard. In fact, the entire room was like an observatory, sticking out with clear windows on all sides. In the very center of the room, there was a mechanical spire-shaped device which connected to the glass ceiling of the room. It's here. This is what I'm looking for. Naruto said, gesturing to the machine in the center of the room. The intruders. Your Majesty, get behind us. The voice that rang out drew Naruto's attention over to the very back of the room, where two retainers were apparently guarding someone. Naruto squinted his eyes, before a manic grin split his face in two. He was reminded so much of Aizen, and those strange eyes definitely weren't normal. But there was no doubt that Naruto was standing right in front of the genuine Soul King. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.